Most people, when they think about using cannabis, think of it in a pretty basic way. It's either recreational and they're looking to get high, or it's a quick fix for pain relief and sleep issues. But there's actually a whole world of ways to use cannabis intentionally to feel better beyond just the basics. So in this video, we're going to go beyond what you normally hear. I'm going to share with you 11 unique and practical ways that you can use cannabis to actually enhance your mental, physical, social, emotional, and even your spiritual well-being. So stick around and you're going to learn new methods for mindfulness, creativity, recovery, and even ways to make daily stress more manageable with cannabis. No clickbait here, just real tips to help you make the most of your cannabis experience. Number 1, enhancing meditation and mindfulness. So this first one affects us on a mental dimension, right? Meditation and mindfulness is all about our mental well-being, our mental health, and our state of mind. So certain cannabis strains, especially ones that are high in CBD or that have relaxing terpene profiles that contain terpenes like linalool, can really help deepen your meditation and mindfulness practices. Now, is this going to give you a meditation and mindfulness practice if this isn't something that you've already worked at on your own? No, it's not like a magic bullet to suddenly be able to sit and meditate if that's something that you've struggled with your whole life and you haven't actually put in the effort and energy and time to make a practice of it, right? Like most people, meditation and mindfulness doesn't just come naturally. We have to make a practice of it. We have to work at it. But cannabis can be a useful tool to include in your practice of that because you can look for calming strains or calming terpenes. In addition to linalool, you can look for strains like terpeneol or alpha bisabolol. Oh man, I nailed that one in the first pronunciation. That's a hard one to say. Say alpha bisabolol 10 times fast and see how you do. But the calming effects of those terpenes specifically and the CBD can ease the mental chatter, which makes it really challenging to meditate. Many times when you're trying to meditate or trying to focus, it becomes challenging because you get the monkey mind that's just going in your brain all the time. So think about using calming cannabinoids and calming terpenes to get yourself into the present moment and to be able to be in the moment and focused on your meditation and mindful as well. You can also think about using a strain that has moderate amounts of THC, especially if you're an experienced meditator, someone who's practiced this for a while, because it can enhance your creative thinking. If you're, meditating about thinking in different directions, thinking in different ways, taking on different perspectives, without causing too much sedation. But be careful because too much THC can actually make it more difficult to be in the moment. It can make it hard to focus and it can make you sleepy, right? If you've taken too much THC, it can be quite sedating. So if you want to add to the CBD that you're consuming, you might want to consider CBG or CBC because both of those can be uplifting cannabinoids. Again, I'll say it now, but everyone's experience with cannabis is different. So if you find that CBG works one way for you, it might not work the same way for somebody else. So it's a very personalized experience, but those are some cannabinoids that you want to try. CBG, CBC, see if those can help you focus and be in the moment. Number 2, boosting creativity and problem solving. So creativity and problem solving, again, is part of the mental dimension of being human and how cannabis affects us. But this is also bringing in the emotional dimension as well, right? Because your emotions are part of your creativity and the way that you problem solve. A lot of creative people and creative professionals use cannabis to unblock new ideas and overcome their creative blocks. This is one of my favorite applications for cannabis as well. If I'm, working on something like a script or something that I'm writing or an article or a project, sometimes you get to a point where you're in a mental block or you are having trouble even getting started, right? So I use my one hitter for this because I don't want to consume too much THC. You want to take on THC in a moderate dose to spark divergent thinking, a change in your perspective. It can help with brainstorming and it can help with problem solving because it allows you to see things in a different way and you can get a different perspective on the thing that you're working through, the problem that you're trying to solve. So I mentioned that I prefer a one hitter for this purpose because I know myself and I know that if I start smoking a joint, I'm probably going to smoke the whole joint. So a one hitter allows me to very specifically and intentionally titrate my dose and go, okay, how am I feeling now? Do I want to use more cannabis? Do I want to use more THC, or am I already in a creative headspace? Because if you use too much THC, it can make it more difficult to focus. So it's really about finding the sweet spot between your current state of being and being too high or too altered, right? You want to find the sweet spot in between those two places that allows you to be more creative and see things in a different light. Now, again, I always mention terpenes that are good for boosting creativity without overwhelming the consumer are limonene or pinene. Pinene often helps with mental clarity and focus. As well, you can try eucalyptol, you can try ocimene and terpenylene, because those are also uplifting terpenes that will help with that kind of change in perspective. So they can help you in addition to both limonene and pinene. Check out eucalyptol, ocimene, and terpenylene. Tapping into flow state. So the flow state is where you're fully immersed in an activity. And I've been thinking about this actually since yesterday when I recorded a podcast with the Disciplined Stoners. And one of the things that we talked about in recording that podcast was joy, and about how I personally find it difficult to get into a state of joy. Happiness is one thing. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty happy person, but actually becoming joyful is something that I've been thinking about with a lot, because I feel like I don't experience joy the way that I used to. And something that 11, one of the hosts of the podcast, brought up is that it's easier to tap into joy when you're in a flow state, when you're fully immersed in an activity, like to the point where it blocks everything else out for you. So I've been thinking about that since we had that conversation, and I think he's right. I think that is one way to experience joy. But regardless, flow state is a beneficial state that we can all find our way to, and it's where we're able to best receive guidance from our higher selves, or from something outside of ourselves, or whatever it is that you believe in, or maybe just nature, right? Or tap into something greater than ourselves. So finding ourselves in a state of flow can be very beneficial, both for our experience as a human, but also for our work and the things that we're trying to create in the world. So you can use cannabis for this. You would want to look for a strain with a balanced THC to CBD ratio, because that's going to give you a combination of relaxation and focus so that you can enter into that state of deep concentration. Flow state can be useful for activities like writing, painting, or even physical tasks like yoga, right? It's that state of being where you block out everything else and you are just completely and totally consumed by and focused on whatever the task at hand is that you are intentionally engaging with, right? Sounds similar to the way that I talk about cannabis. So they do certainly go together. And in addition to looking for balanced THC to CBD ratios, you could also look for terpenes that help with balance, like beta-caryophyllene and beta-pinene. So beta-pinene is a bit more balanced in effects than alpha-pinene, which is very useful for memory and for focus. So you would want to look for those two terpenes as well to help you get into a flow state. Use case number 4 is improving digestive health. So this obviously is part of the physical dimension of being human. Our digestive health is very important. If we're not able to digest and absorb all of the nutrients that we consume, we suffer as a human, right? And it's not good for our bodies. So cannabis, especially strains that have high CBG or high CBD, strains and products, of course, you could use oils or edibles for this. They have really been helping people with gastrointestinal issues. In the deep dive video that I did on CBG, I shared about my mom, about how she took prescription medications for years because of her inflammatory bowel disease. Ulcerative colitis is her diagnosis. And she took prescription medications for years until her doctors eventually told her that she was going to have to go on kidney dialysis because of all of the years of prescription medications. At that time, she began a high CBG and high CBD daily regimen. Within several months, her levels were all back to normal, and she's now off of her prescription medications for her inflammatory bowel disease, and her kidney and liver levels are all back to normal. So she does not have to take any more prescription medications for her gut disorder because of her CBG and CBD usage. So we have experiments showing this in animal models that it absolutely helps to improve digestive health, particularly CBG. But we're hearing more and more anecdotal information about consumers who are using this to soothe inflammation in their gut. So we have many endocannabinoid receptors in our gut. Our gut health is incredibly important. Our gut has been called our second brain because it produces so many of the neurotransmitters and the chemicals that are required for us to regulate our own bodies and our own brains. So our guts are very important. And cannabis can help regulate digestion by interacting with the endocannabinoid system receptors that we have in our guts. So if you're interested in learning more about this specifically, please check out the deep dive that I did on CBG. I will link it here in this video for you so that you can go check it out. And that, I guess, brings us to it being a good time to mention that if you're enjoying this video, please do like it, share it with somebody else if you think it's useful for them, and subscribe to the channel. Like, do the things. Thank you. Okay. All right, number 5, microdosing for daily wellness. This would impact us on the emotional dimension of being human. So different people are interested in microdosing different substances, which just means that you use a very small amount of something, and it's actually subperceptual, the effects. So you don't even notice it. If you do notice it, then that's not technically a microdose. So a microdose, you wouldn't notice. So it would be a very small dosage of THC, like 1 milligram, 2 milligrams, 5 milligrams, whatever it would be for you, that would provide very subtle and beneficial effects, but without intoxication. So this can help you feel more balanced, it can improve your mood, or it can increase your focus throughout the day. So a microdose, instead of taking a larger dose or even a macrodose, can help you manage your stress without causing impairment or a noticeable high. So again, the dosage is going to be different for everyone. So you will want to experiment to see what works best for you so that you're not getting too altered and making it challenging to actually carry out the things that you need to do during the day. Now, in terms of consumption methods, this is when an edible or oils would be really good because you can very specifically titrate the dose and get it to be exactly what you're looking for. It's a little more challenging to do that with an inhalation method of dried bud because you don't know exactly how much THC you're getting at any given time. Now, again, if you've experimented and you know that this works really well for you, then of course, use your one hitter, use your bong, whatever it is, to just microdose a small dosage of THC throughout your day. And with also your consumption method would impact how frequently you consumed, right? So if you were inhaling, you would probably want to take a puff maybe once an hour or once every couple of hours. But if you were eating edibles or taking oils, those are much longer lasting in your body. So you wouldn't need to consume as frequently. You would maybe want to consume every 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. But again, you would want to experiment and see what works for you. This would be a good chance to start an intentional consumption journal, whether it's just a piece of paper. I have a template that I will put in the description of this video. It's free. You can download it. You can use it to keep track of your consumption. Or there are a number of apps that are available in different app stores. I've been exploring those apps lately. I'm planning to do a video for you in which I take a look at the different apps and see what the benefits and the features are for each and who might want to use them. But in the meantime, feel free to use whatever works for you, because if you are starting a microdosing regimen or any kind of regimen using cannabis, you're going to want to keep track of what you've consumed, how it makes you feel, and what the outcomes are overall for you so that you know the right products to use and the right products to avoid if something doesn't make you feel good. You know what it is. Now, the 6th unique usage of cannabis that I want to talk about is using cannabis as a tool for shadow work. All right, we are entering Scorpio season here, so it is the perfect time to engage in shadow work. And the dimension of humanity, or the dimension of being a human that this cannabis consumption use would impact, would be your relationship with yourself and ultimately your relationship with others. Right? So shadow work is the practice of exploring and then integrating the darker parts of yourself. So it's about sitting with yourself and taking a really long and hard look at the pieces of yourself that you normally avoid, the things within you that make you feel bad or that seem like they're an unacceptable part of you, or that they are a thing within you that keeps you separate from your truest self. Shadow work is the practice of exploring those pieces of you, understanding that they are in fact part of who you are, and in fact they're an integral part, they're an important part of who you are, accepting those pieces and then integrating them into your life so that they can become part of who you are. Well, if you've never engaged in this and you're just listening to this, you're right that it can be a very challenging thing to engage in. And those of you who have engaged in this, like this is super, super challenging. It's very difficult. It hurts, right? You're exploring the parts of yourself that hurt, that were hurt by someone else, and that you have built a protective shell or coating around so that you can avoid being hurt by others in the future. But cannabis can be a useful tool if you're exploring this practice, because if you've chosen the right strain or the right product and you have the right mindset, cannabis can actually help bring your buried emotions to the surface and then give you, in combination with more empathy for yourself in that moment, a deeper understanding of your personal patterns and your triggers. So you can really get into it because cannabis can change your mind. It can change your perspective. I would recommend using a combination of THC and CBG because it allows for you to change your perspective and change where you're coming from. But at the same time, the CBG is quite uplifting. So the THC really changes your perspective and your mental state. But the CBG keeps you focused and in the moment. And it allows you to have enough mental clarity to process those emotions after you've unlocked them. Deep work. Shadow work is deep work, but again, it's something that we all need to engage in order to be our healthiest selves across all dimensions, because we are holistic beings and we can't just heal one part of ourselves and expect the rest of us to be fine if we haven't also addressed the rest of us. We have to address our physical being and our emotional being and our mental being and our connective being, right? Wellness is a holistic thing. It encompasses many parts of who we are as people. So shadow work's an important part of that. Not sorry. Okay, use number 7 is to use cannabis in a breathwork practice. Okay, so this is an interesting one. This would be probably like both a physical and a mental dimension, right? So people are more and more working on these breathwork practices, and I've tried it a few times, and I think they're very interesting. They really help to get you into a different mental state, and they really can help with focus. For some people, it's about getting focused on work and paying attention and being present in the moment, and for other people, it allows them to focus more on other aspects of mental clarity and of spiritual growth. So whatever the reason for your breathwork practice, cannabis can be integrated into it. So, and one interesting piece of this is that there is some documentation that smoking cannabis actually improves your lung capacity. So researchers aren't really sure if that's because you're breathing in like big breaths of air at one time, and so that increases your lung capacity, or if it's actually some aspect of the cannabis itself that is doing that. It's probably the deep breathing component of it that increases your lung capacity over time. So that's an interesting piece to consider if you're thinking about using cannabis for breath work. Now, some people, and this is very anecdotal, I couldn't find any research to back this up, but some people claim that sativa strains specifically are better for this purpose because for some reason they're better for expanding lung capacity and for getting you into the proper mental state for breath work. So when we say sativa, of course, everything on the market's a hybrid. So I would look for something with an uplifting terpene profile if this is something that you wanted to engage in, right? You're not looking to sedate yourself. You're not looking to fall asleep. You're just looking to change your perspective as you engage in this specific practice. So It might make it easier to engage in deep breathing techniques that release tension and increase oxygen flow if you've had a bit of cannabis beforehand and has really helped you relax your body. I think it's a very interesting idea to explore, especially if you're already into breathwork. I don't know if I would use cannabis for my very first breathwork session if I was new to breathwork, but if that's a practice that you've had for some time, try incorporating cannabis into it and see if it increases your lung capacity, or see if it improves your ability to stay focused in the moment and continue with the breathwork practice that you're already engaged in. So the 8th unique usage of cannabis to feel better is to support recovery from overstimulation. There are lots of folks, myself included, who experience sensory overload or really get overstimulated in environments like loud cities, busy streets, big crowds, the mall, workspaces with lots of screens. So cannabis can help you reset your nervous system if you're feeling overstimulated. So you want to look for a very relaxing terpene profile, first of all. And we'll talk about the cannabinoids that you might want to consider in a minute. But look for things that have that are high in myrcene or terpineol or humulene, because all 3 of those terpenes can really calm the senses. They can help to reduce anxiety, and they can promote relaxation after you've been overwhelmed or you've had a lot of stimulus coming from around you. So you want to look for a very relaxing profile. Linalool can obviously help too. That's maybe our most relaxing terpene that people are familiar with, but you're not going to find strains that are dominant in it, because there's I think 4% of cannabis strains are dominant in linalool or something like that. So look for myrcene, look for terpineol, look for humulene. Now, in terms of the cannabinoid profile that you're going to want to look for, you're going to want to look for something that's really quite a bit more sedating than normal, right? Because you're trying to reset your nervous system. You want to tamp down the overstimulation that you're feeling. So you don't want too much THC unless you're very experienced with the THC headspace and you know that, you can use a lot of THC to really just sort of dissociate, which you can do with high amounts of THC. But it's probably not going to make you feel very relaxed if you do that. So you're going to want to incorporate some CBD. Think about CBG depending on how CBG works for you. So for about 20% of people, CBG is quite sedating and actually makes them feel relaxed and want to fall asleep. If you're in that group of 20%, then great. You can use CBG for this purpose as well to reset your nervous system. But if you're not in this group, CBG might actually be a bit more uplifting than you want. So in that case, look for a balanced ratio of THC to CBD for your cannabinoid profile. The 9th unique way to use cannabis to feel better is to create deeper interpersonal connections. So this would be one way that cannabis would work with us on a social dimension, right? Because a social aspect is an important aspect of being human. How do we connect with other people? The point of being here is to learn and experience and grow, and part of that is to connect with other people on your path. So cannabis, when you're using it intentionally, it can absolutely deepen your connections with your friends, with your family, with your spouse, with your kids, with, your partner, with all different loved ones in your life. When you consume a low dose of THC, especially combined with CBD, it can really help reduce your social anxiety. If THC makes you anxious, then skip the THC totally and just go with CBD and maybe some CBG. It can also help to foster open, vulnerable conversation. So maybe it's not social anxiety that you're experiencing because, you're going to a party, but maybe it's about actually having those intimate, vulnerable conversations with friends or a partner or, a loved one. And if you're having trouble being open and vulnerable, cannabis can help enhance that and make for more meaningful interactions. Now, I would definitely recommend that you practice this before you engage in it, because you don't want to show up to your therapy session totally high if that's not something that you're used to, or if your partner wasn't expecting that, then you might make them a little upset. So it would be a good thing to practice with, especially in low doses before you move into higher doses. But It can absolutely change your perspective and change the way that you connect with other people. Personally, I find that cannabis makes me feel more empathetic and understanding. So it's easier to connect with others on an emotional level. It's easier for me to take their perspective. It's easier for me to say, oh, okay, I can see where you're coming from. I can understand that, right? Instead of being like, well, this is how I feel, so this is the truth. Right? It makes me more empathetic. It makes it easier for me to understand where others are coming from. And personally, also, I know that when I'm in a social situation, I'm a bit of an introvert. So I'd rather just sort of stand along the wall and watch everybody else at a party. So cannabis definitely acts as a social lubricant. It makes it easier to talk to people. I feel more relaxed. It's easier to be myself, especially in place of alcohol. If you don't like the way alcohol makes you feel, or you don't want to use alcohol in that way, you can use cannabis to interact and connect more with people in a social setting as well. The 10th way to use cannabis to feel better is to use cannabis in a sensory deprivation tank. So there's a growing trend in wellness, these float therapy or sensory deprivation tanks that are supposed to promote deep relaxation and introspection. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried one of these, but you basically go into this big tank of salt water, which allows you to completely float. And so it's dark, there's no sound. I think you can listen to sound if you want to, but it's totally dark. And so some people actually report having psychedelic experiences in these sensory deprivation tanks because they don't have any of the sensory information around them. So it allows you to go really deeply into your own mind and into your own psyche and get this real intense introspection that would be challenging to do without sensory deprivation. So if that's something that you enjoy, float therapy or sensory deprivation, then THC can enhance the immersive experience by helping your body completely relax. And then adding a bit of CBD into that can ensure that you stay centered and in a mindful state during the float. Because, if you're in there for an hour, you want to make the most of the experience. So you want to stay centered, you want to stay focused on what you're doing in the moment. And both THC and CBD, when you're using them in a balanced way, can help with that. I would also consider using some CBG to give yourself more of an uplifting experience if you're someone that CBG is uplifting for. Or you could also consider CBC, because that is an even more uplifting experience, especially if you find that THC makes you feel a bit sleepy. You can add some more CBC into that experience if you're consuming an oil or an edible or something that allows you to precisely dose the different cannabinoids, and that might give you a more focused and uplifting experience as well. And the 11th and final unique way to use cannabis to feel better is to recalibrate your relationship with time. All right, so I know, what even is time? What even is time? Well, it's a man-made construct, first of all. We can start with that. Time's not a thing. Time doesn't exist, right? It's only ever now. But we've invented the concept of time so that we can measure the passing of events. Right, it's an interesting and unique part of being human. If you were not human and you were a different kind of being, and perhaps you were in a different dimension or you experienced things differently, you would not have the same concept of time that you have in being a human on this planet at this time. So if you're looking to alter your current perception of time, then cannabis can give you a really interesting shift in how you experience time. So some strains can really make time feel a lot slower, which lets you get into the present moment and really savor it and engage more fully with what's happening in this present moment, where you don't think about the future or the past. It's like that flow state that we were talking about before in an earlier usage, right? And this can also help you be here now, be more focused, and be in the present moment. While other strains or products can actually help speed up boring tasks, right? Like how many of us have had to do something boring and just go smoke a joint first because you knew that it would help to pass the time and it would speed up something that you were doing that was mundane or monotonous and you didn't actually really want to engage in it. So you can experiment with cannabis with intention if you want to explore your relationship with time. You want to find out what speeds time up for you and what slows time down for you. So I definitely would recommend that you keep track of your consumption with a consumption journal if you engage in this, because this is going to be very, very personalized, right? What works for one person is not going to work the same way for another person at all. But if you engage in it with intention and you keep track of your consumption, you keep track of your experiences, you keep track of how things work for you, then you're going to have a good idea about, okay, now I have to, I'm going to have to do this boring task all afternoon. I know exactly what to consume ahead of time to make it go by more quickly. Or I'm looking to get into flow state because I really want to, go into monk mode for 4 hours this afternoon and completely focus on my writing. Well, then you know what other product to try to help you get into the right state for that, right? So this is why we keep an intentional consumption journal, is because then you can look back and say, oh, this strain affected me in this way. That's not what I'm looking for, or it is what I'm looking for. And then you know what product is going to work best for you. So those are my 11 unique ways to use cannabis to feel better. I hope that some of them were things that you had never thought about before, and that perhaps you can consider incorporating into your own intentional cannabis consumption journey. And if you do decide to engage in some of these practices, let me know about it. Let me know in the comments. Send me a message here on YouTube or on whatever social media you follow me on, and let me know how it went for you. I would love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about people's experiences with weed, and I'd love to hear about people using cannabis with intention. So thank you for sticking around for this video. I know it was a little bit shorter than usual, and that's okay. That's great. And I hope that you find some good ways to incorporate cannabis into your life. Until next time, I'll see ya.